Leith Ross is a Juno-nominated singer-songwriter. They got their sort of start during the pandemic when they started posting music on TikTok. And their songs about love and relationships and sort of inner turmoil struck a chord with millions of folks online. Now they're back with a new album. It's called I Can See the Future. I'm so happy to say that Leith joins me now in studio to talk about it all. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
You've had a bit of a ride.
Yes, that's true.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm like a little bit nervous and maybe apprehensive about getting back into, releasing and touring and stuff, but I'm good. I'm getting there.
Yeah, because it wasn't that long ago.
No. And at the same time, I feel like because it kind of feels like all or nothing, then when I'm not doing that, it really feels like I'm not doing that. So it also does feel like a long time ago, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's just not that long ago you started doing this in a real way at all.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, that's true. In the grand scheme of things, like 3.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that in a second, but I want to talk about this record because I really loved it. I Can See the Future is the name of the record, also sort of maybe the theme of the record. And my understanding is you discovered something called radical optimism.
Yeah.
Tell me about radical optimism.
So essentially, it's pretty self-descriptive, I would say. It's like choosing to be optimistic about the world, even though like everything is sort of seeming to like everything makes you feel like you can't be optimistic about the world. And essentially it was like a few years ago, I was just feeling very run down and burnt out by how hard it was to be alive and to see things that happen.
The news, the world around us. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. And basically I found somebody talking about the concept of radical optimism online and read it, looked a bit more into it. And it just is like a way to kind of keep you going. Like, I feel like when you feel really like run down and pessimistic about the work that you're trying to do, it doesn't inspire you to keep doing it. And by believing that you're going to win, or we're going to win, and a better world will be created, it kind of inspires you to do that work, even if you're never going to get to see the fruits of your labor.
There's a theory that that's what heaven is. Hey, there's a theory that that heaven is a mistranslation. The idea that we go somewhere when we die.
Yeah.
That there is a theory out there that the actual meaning of heaven in the Bible is that you build to work a better life for the future.
Ugh, that's beautiful. I love that.
I find it a little bit more easy to hold on to.
Definitely. My dad always said that, heaven is like what we try to create, and then hell is what we're already living, basically.
I like the first part.
Yeah.
Your dad, it was like a philosophy professor or teacher?
Teacher, yeah, high school teacher.
So what were the dinner table conversations like?
Ooh, they were intense.
Yeah, really?
They were very intense.
Tell me.
It was just like the meaning of life stuff from a very young age, which I feel like maybe sometimes people underestimate kids and not being able, thinking that kids can't talk about that kind of stuff, but we loved it. And he would sometimes bring home curriculum, for lack of a better word, from his teachings. He would show certain movies in class and talk about the philosophical implications of them and stuff. And so then he'd bring it home, and we'd do that at home too. He'd play us a movie and then ask me and my siblings what we thought about it and kind of challenge us, and kind of the Socratic method, just asking us why we believed what we believed. And yeah, it was just always a part of my childhood and part of my life.
I mean, it's an interesting way to grow up.
Definitely.
Is it in your music at all? Do you think it's infiltrated your songwriting at all?
Oh, 100%. Also my personality.
your general vibe?
Yeah, my general vibe.
What do you mean?
I guess I'm just so used to questioning everything in every way, shape, and form, which is so much of every part of what I am. So questioning myself and why I do things, questioning the people in my life who I love and why they do things so I can better understand them, questioning the powers that be and the structures and the government, just questioning everything, because that's kind of what my parents taught me was important. And yeah.
But that questioning can lead to deep cynicism. If you question enough, you can become so cynical with the way the world works. If I'm understanding you correctly,
yeah.
The reason this radical optimism talk made it into this record and that we're going to talk about is because you saw a way of questioning everything while looking at the bright side, looking towards a more loving, good future.
Exactly. Or it's sort of because when you ask the questions, unfortunately, sometimes you get the answers. And the answers are usually bad. When you're talking about why things are happening in the world, unless the thing that you were looking at is a good thing. So I guess like what I learned was to ask the question and get the answer, and then just be stubborn about making a choice to not let it get me down, or to, use whatever horrid energy I'm experiencing and kind of direct it towards some kind of action that's going to actually like help to change something.
I think you made a beautiful record about things that is about that really. Now I understand it a little bit better, about things that are would seem very hard, but the sort of the beauty within them. So let's talk about this song. Can you play that song?
I never will stop grieving who we are when we were young. For my grandmother, her children, and who I never will become. For a feeling that is fading more each day I see the sun. I never will stop grieving. Grief is all I know of love. For grief is love run backwards. Great movie.
It's a beautiful melody.
Thank you.
And so I should say who you are. That's Leith Ross with their song "Grieving" from their album "I Can See the Future." A lot of Scotch Irish stuff going on there. Even in the whistles and the mandolins, the folk music there with the banjo, but even just the da dum da dum dum da da. Like, it's very as someone steeped in that world, it's very folk music to me. And my understanding is that was intentional.
Yes, definitely. I wrote the song when I was grieving my grandfather, who was an amazing Scottish man who could play 7 instruments but couldn't read music. And when I was growing up, I was just always around the house. Specifically, was an incredible fiddle and mandolin player. So it just like felt appropriate to kind of like have a piece of him in that song.
Where did he live? Where did he live?
He emigrated from Glasgow in the late 70s-ish.
Yeah.
And spent the rest of his life in Brantford.
Ontario?
Yeah, Brantford, Ontario.
Is that where you're from?
No, I'm originally from Ottawa. But that's where my grandparents were my whole life. So I would come like 4 times a year.
And did you like the music he played? Were you like, that's kind of grandpa's music, who cares about it?
No, I always loved it. I think it was like, I just loved that there was something being passed down, even from when I was really young. Like, it was just wonderful for there to always be music playing. And he would teach me the songs when I was little,
Like what?
I don't know, just like he'd be sitting in the corner playing Fields of Athenry and then like teaching me the lyrics, and we'd be singing it together, and me and my siblings too, and my mom and grandma. Yeah, it was just like a beautiful part of my childhood, and I feel like I somehow never really totally took it for granted.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
So then I'm sad to hear he died, and then you write the song Why? I mean, it's sort of about him, but it's also sort of about the experience of grieving him.
Yeah, totally. And it's also sort of about, which we ended up making the music video based on this concept. But I also wrote it because of like a couple of quirks, for lack of a better word, that my wonderful mother has. One of them is that she really wants a living wake. She like thinks it's very silly that all the nicest things that everyone will ever say about her will happen after she's dead and can't hear them. She's like, I want you to tell me all these nice things you're going to say at my funeral while I'm still alive. And so I kind of wrote it about that. It was like I used her lens to kind of like make a promise to myself and to her and to my grandfather that I would like essentially live my life like I'm having a living wake for everything, so that I can really appreciate everything and everyone the way that I would if I had lost them, if that makes sense.
It does, but I want to stay on it, because the line that I wrote down when I was listening to it was, "I'll never stop grieving. Grief is all I know of love." And I'll be honest with you, Leith, when I heard that line, I thought to myself, doesn't sound like a very nice way to go through life.
Yeah, that's fair.
I was like, someone is grieved. I was like, sounds like a bummer, Like
Yeah.
I'm walking around crying and sad and missing people all the time. And then I thought a little bit more about it, and this goes back to what we were talking about taking things that seem very awful and maybe finding the brighter side of them. But can you talk more about that like grieving someone is actually a beautiful part of life, and it might even be necessary for kind of right outlook on life?
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of it is related to the fact that, especially in the West, we have this very like messed up relationship with grief, where it's so devastating and we don't spend any time preparing for it. And I don't think we're careful enough about how we care for each other when it happens. There's sort of like a hush hush, don't talk about it kind of thing around death in the, this sort of Western culture that I grew up in. But it's very different in a lot of different ways in different places, and most especially in Celtic tradition. So like my grandfather's funeral was like literally one of the best days of my life. It was such a party. Like we were whiskey drunk. We like all his friends were there. We went in a circle. Everybody played songs, and it was like genuinely so joyful at the same time. And I think that when we think about grieving, we immediately have those bad feelings, that kind of like suffocating feeling. But when you're kind of like doing it right, for lack of a better word, and like paying attention to it and making it into also a celebration, it is like one of the most beautiful human feelings.
Sure. And listen, that's how I grew up. I grew up with wakes, and I grew up with, when members of my family died, and we would get together. And I mean, for God's sake, I remember when my father died, and it was like the saddest thing I've ever gone through. And then that night, we find ourselves on the piano, all of our families singing songs, and it was beautiful. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that thing you said where what did you say? Like the song about grieving, if I go through life grieving everything,
right,
it makes life what? More beautiful? Tell me what you mean by that, because that feels like an acute realization, Leith.
Yeah. I guess it is more beautiful, or it's more kind.
What do you mean to go through life grieving, knowing you're grieving everything?
Yeah. It just makes me nicer, I think, or it makes me more gracious. Like I'm able to forgive everything and to see everybody holistically and everything holistically, and also like take things less personally. Like when I'm imagining that things might end or I might never experience something again, I'm like looking at it with the most like kindest, gracious outlook, where I'm like able to see it for what it really is and like not experience so much ego about stuff, and just let things go a bit easier and forgive everybody, and be better at being forgiven and all that stuff. It just like kind of makes me a nicer person, because imagining that it's like that high stakes scenario like encourages me to be gentler with everything.
If you can go through life with a sense of impermanence, it makes everything seem silly and wonderful.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's one sort of big idea on the record. Another one's, can we play the Stay song?
My breath is your breath, and my water's your water. I couldn't be fed and not share in this altar, 'cause I cannot be you alone.
That's a little bit of Stay by Leith Ross from their new record, I Can See the Future. Leith's my guest right now. We're talking about the big things here today, aren't we?
Yes, definitely.
That song came out of yearning for community.
Yes.
What does that mean?
It just means that I have a lot of friendships that I love, but I haven't always felt like I have community with this sort of like, for lack of a better term, like family in my adulthood that is kind of like radical. And
What does that mean? Like, what would it look like, the community that you don't have?
we kind of are trying to break some societal norms that are sort of imposed on relationships. So we're like feeding each other, like, sharing resources pretty intimately, spending more time together than is considered normal, maybe cohabitating in some way, growing food.
A way that people lived in community with their relatives or not their relatives for a very, very long time.
Exactly.
So what caused this yearning for community that you had?
I guess I just realized that the sort of like obsession with individualism that has kind of like been imposed on me my whole life was just eventually really starting to wear me down. Like, I feel like this has been talked about a lot more now, but sort of this like you don't owe anybody anything culture that has come out of like late stage capitalism, where it's like we feel like we are maybe entitled to not have to make any sacrifices for people or not have to do any labor for people. And I'm somebody who believes that that's like completely not true. And I think that as human beings, we owe each other that stuff. And I want to be able to make sacrifices, whether it's for people like that are in my life immediately or for people who I don't know. And yeah, just like trying to unlearn like what the things about society that made me feel so lonely, like just so like I have to figure it out on my own or else I'm kind of like failing.
So what happened when you started writing the song? Like, what was the origin of the song? Because what I read is that you had an epiphany while you wrote the song, but that's what did the song start as then? When did the song start?
Yeah, it was literally just I was sitting in my house by myself and thinking about that and feeling so sad. And I think like on that day, I was like just specifically yearning to be like making dinner with somebody or something, you know, mundane. And I didn't have anybody to do it with. And I was like kind of realizing that it might be my fault. Like I want that so badly, but what am I really doing to get it, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
So I started writing it like, oh, how I love you, and if I could know you more than I know you now, like that first line. It's like, if I could only be closer to you in an emotional way, then maybe I would get what I'm looking for.
Who's you?
Everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of literally was thinking about everybody in the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you're writing it, and then what's this epiphanous moment?
That realization that I have to do something about it. Like, I can't just sit around longing for this thing that is radical and not be taking steps to make it happen, you know? Like, if I want the world to show up for me in that way, then I have to show up first, if that makes sense. Especially how things are now. Like, sometimes you do need to actually be the catalyst for something like that happening.
And did you?
I think so. I'm still learning.
What'd you do?
I, brought some things to my neighbors and made some people food and, was able to start participating in a lot more mutual aid and also just learning, reading a lot about the world and my place in it and sort of like how my actions are affecting everything. And I don't know, those are the first steps, but I'm still on my journey.
How did it make you feel when you started doing these things?
Amazing. It made me feel like I belong to something, humanity. I feel like we all do sort of inherently, but when you're trying to like be more conscious about belonging to the sort of intrinsic thing of humanity, then it's like you feel like you're a part of it more in some emotional way.
That's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear that it made you feel amazing, I think, because I, like everybody, can fall victim into, especially, in a big city that like I live in.
Yeah.
This, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
I had a really long week of work,
Yeah.
and like I know I'm supposed to see a friend tonight, but I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Or like, there's something on Netflix. I'm going to go watch Netflix. You know what I mean? I'm just
Totally.
going to, or I don't want to get out of the house. And so I think I needed to hear from you, or I think people listening to this who definitely feel that way need to hear from you that it's not just a utopian ideal to build community. It can actually make you feel really good. Totally.
And also I am very passionate about validating too, like not to be that guy, but I'm like, it's kind of purposeful. Like
what does validating mean?
Like, so to that concept you were talking about of like, I'm exhausted, like I'm so tired from my job, I just want to go home and watch TV. Like, I think that's purposeful. Like the structure of the society that we live in kind of wants us to not have enough energy to be good community members because then we can't take care of each other and they can take advantage of us more. And I feel like, I just want to validate that it's like often we don't have the energy for it, which is partially why it's a sacrifice, but that the sacrifice is so worth it, in my opinion.
Do you ever find it funny that your vocation is a songwriter? Because the way I hear you talking, which I really love everything you're saying. I feel like in ancient times or like 100 years ago, you might have been a priest or you might have been, or you may have been a teacher. You may have been like, do you ever find it funny that you have these sort of these sort of, sharp ideas about our society and what we could do to be better? And I think even like to say that the world can be good is radical, very radical right now. Do you ever feel funny that your vocation about it is writing songs?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really easy to feel like, especially right now, like writing songs is just like, a bit silly. I don't know. I'm kind of like la-di-da. Like I'm having all these big feelings and realizations, and I'm like, guess I'll write another little tune about it. Like what else am I supposed to do? But I also, have always been most inspired by musicians who are really good at doing that and kind of like can teach you about the world like so efficiently with just a couple of lines. And
like whom?
Like, I grew up listening most to Chris Christopherson. My dad was always playing around the house. That man is so good at talking about, like, it's such political writing, but it's not hitting you over the head. Like, he's just giving you these characters that you're empathizing with, and it's teaching you so much about the world and about yourself and about the human condition. But it's not even something you're necessarily conscious of. But that's what I have always loved the most about songwriting. So ideally, I would be able to channel, like, some of it into songwriting like that, where I can make people like, or help people to think about those things, but with a kind of like cushion, like a a little world to live in that makes it easier to think about them, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think you're doing it. I think that accounts for the amount of attention your music is getting.
Thank you.
God knows I've talked to a lot of people, weirdly enough, who have had your story where they have,
Yeah.
maybe not your exact story, but they have found themselves with a big TikTok hit
Yeah.
and then look out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're in LA and they're in New York and they're doing it. They're trying to capitalize on that.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few cities in this country, I would say, that I love more than Winnipeg, Manitoba. The city is very great to me. I host the Winnipeg Folk Festival every year. I feel part of that community. A lot of my friends in the folk music community are in Winnipeg. However, not a lot of people when they get a big blush of TikTok success move to Winnipeg if they're not already there.
It's true.
Why'd you do that?
I just basically was feeling a little bit. The last place I had lived and worked was as a musician was here, even though it was very, very brief because, again, I played my first show. But I went to school here. And I think I was feeling just a little bit overwhelmed with the scale of everything. And I was feeling a little bit disenchanted with doing music as a career because I could really feel the industry. And that's not always a bad thing, but it just got into my head and I was kind of like, okay, well, I have to be one of the 4 folk musicians who make it in Toronto, you know? And then also it's like hard to pay rent and I was just having a really hard time. And I wasn't totally feeling like the life that I was leading as a musician was what music was supposed to be, if that makes sense. And so I was brought out to play Harvest Moon just outside of Winnipeg. Like it was one of the first things I did. And I just, like, every person was so supportive. Every musician wanted to sing together and play together, and they came on stage spontaneously during the set. And it was just, like, so welcoming, and there was no sense of competition, and lots of people who were making music just for the sake of it, which I think is also so important for a healthy music scene, like to have some people who aren't trying to make it big. And that's also not really my goal either. So, yeah, I just went, and it felt so wonderful, and I felt like, okay, if I'm gonna be able to do this long term and take care of myself, like I have to follow this feeling. And then I asked one of my friends how much they pay in rent, and I was like, I'm here.
Yeah, I think it's
Sign me up.
I think it's a beautiful thing that you're there, and
Thank you.
I think I'm so glad. I worried coming from a community like that myself, which had a really strong, robust scene. They were going away for a while.
Yeah.
And they seem like they might start to be coming back in these communities, and it's really lovely to see.
Yeah, I think it's kind of related to what we were talking about before. Like everybody is kind of feeling this pull back to something really real and offline and supportive and kind of anti-capitalist and all that stuff.
Well, you know what I'm going to close off by asking you, because when you drop in the middle of that last answer, oh, these people are chasing success. These people are trying to make. There got to be a lot of people who don't want to make it big. There's a lot of people whose goal can't be to have this kind of success.
Yeah.
And you said, mind you, that's not my goal either.
Yeah.
So what's your goal?
My goal is to try to be as creative as possible and make as much music as possible with the least amount of those outside influences as possible. Like I just want to be a person who, against all odds, is like just creating all the time, honestly, and just like writing music because I love writing music and because I love trying to understand myself and the world, and trying to do it just for those reasons. And as long as I can, support myself, take care of myself, and take care of my people, then I don't need anything else. I just want to be that kind of creative so badly.
I think it's a noble goal, and I'm glad you got there, and I'm glad you didn't become a priest, to be honest.
Me too. I don't know that they would have accepted me.
No, I wouldn't say. I'd say you would have had a hard road. I'd say if that was your goal, you would have had a hard road getting there, to be honest. I'm glad you didn't for a bunch of reasons.
The first gay transgender priest.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? Stick with music. I think you'd have a hard time getting into the priesthood. They're lost, to be honest. You made a great record. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me.